Okay, there is a new weed invading your lawn, and if you're not paying attention, it can really make a nightmare out of things, and it can even be worse than crabgrass. Gonna better pay attention to this one for all you lawn lovers. Okay, the biggest thing we're dealing with in the lawns these days, short of crabgrass, which many of us have, if you follow the protocols, you put down the preventatives, maybe spot spraying for them. And with all the rain we're getting in this, I guess we're halfway through July already, lawns are actually looking really good. If it wasn't for the fungus and diseases that have been popping around with all this damp, humid weather, now that we've leveled off, things are really looking good, and lawns are holding up great for July. Except, you can see these little pockets of weeds popping up in the lawns, and they can really make a hassle out of things, and it's called nutsedge. So it doesn't really look like crabgrass. It's very distinctive, but at the very beginning, right now when the heat starts kicking in, you just get this little lime green plant. It's hard to tell because it's a little bit darker out now, but we'll turn around closer so you can take a look, see what's going on. All right, so as you start looking closer at the lawn, you start noticing that there's pockets here that are just growing a little bit faster than the rest of it, and then there's a lot in here that is a little lime green, and it's a little lighter than the rest of it. So that's how I first start noticing that nutsedge is popping up in a lawn, when you start seeing that lime green and you start looking. If you walk up to it and pull up the individual plants, you know it's nutsedge because when you roll it in your fingers, it's triangular, and so it's not a nice smooth roll. But the tough part with this plant is that it's noxious, and it grows almost like an onion, where you get all these roots that go down, but it'll form all these little nutlets inside you. So even though you can walk up to them and grab them and pull them out pretty easy, you never get all of it because the bulb forms at a pretty young age. And so even though I pull this out, there's a bulb down there waiting to start the cycle all over again. So I'm gonna come around to a couple other spots that are just really show you how aggressive they can get. But when they're inside your lawns, the problem is with nutsedge is that if you're on a conventional lawn care program where you're either doing it yourself or you're having somebody, usually by mid-June, late June, we're done applying most weed preventers. And in my experience, the reason nutsedge gets so bad is the fact that it doesn't start emerging from the ground until it's really hot out. And because it's coming back and it's a true perennial, crabgrass comes back from seed every year. So we have an opportunity to break that cycle by putting down a preventative. But for nutsedge, we don't have that luxury. It's a true perennial, so it's going to come back year after year from the root system. And each year it's going to get worse and worse. And the biggest hindrance is because it doesn't really come out until it starts getting hot, we're limited on what products we could use on it. Because what I have found is that if you're on any kind of professional lawn care program, by the time you get out there in mid-June and do your last fertilizer application, and most of us are spraying the weeds at that point, or if you're having outsourcing that and having a company do it for you, they're out there in mid-June, late June doing it, and the nutsedge is still baby. So it slips through the cracks of any of the lawn fertilizers, the lawn herbicides. So even if your broadleaf weed killers worked, they still weren't even emerging yet, or they were just barely babies and usually get missed over. Then on top of it, it doesn't, because it is actually a sedge. It's not a traditional broadleaf weed. It's not a typical grassy weed. So it kind of falls in this weird category. So usually what I say is historically, there's little ready-to-use bottles. Everybody calls it something different, but it has to specifically say for sedge. And so I think there's Sedge Ender, Sedge Stop. But there's a pretty cool new product that we're going to be experimenting with here. I don't have any feedback on it, but it's Sedge Stop. One of the beauties I like of this is it's a one-time application that's a granular, and you just take it, just shake it and sprinkle it over the troubled areas. Doesn't need to be watered in, doesn't need to be wet when it's applying. So I'm going to be experimenting with that. If it works well, I'll get back to you, but all the literature, everything I was reading, was saying great things about it. And I love the convenience because it has persistent control. So in those areas, we really haven't had a tool for this. You could go out there and spray the lawn, but if we were at typical hot temperatures and dry in the middle of July, I don't want to be spraying anything on my lawn because I can do more damage to the existing lawn. So we start applying the sedge killers at the time of year when the grass doesn't want to be sprayed. We're trying to kill the sedge to protect the grass, but inadvertently by spraying the sedge, we could be killing the grass. So it's this vicious cycle. So that's where this new product, I'm really intrigued on how it works. So I'll be getting back to you on that. But anybody that's dealing with Nutsedge, I think it's worth a shot. But let me show you how bad it can get when you let it go. So this is Nutsedge and Morning Glory vine. So this is the side of the hill that I don't really go too much. So I'm not really paying much attention, but that's all 12 inches long. This wasn't even here last spring. So this is just from the end of year last year, and this is the first season flush. So just by looking at it, just because we've had disturbed soil here that's going through, the Morning Glory vines are taking over. And you're seeing pockets of the Nutsedge popping up all over the place. And so this is going to be a great test spot for my product. But if you don't take care of this aggressively up front, it can really become a nightmare for you. Okay, so that's it. Nutsedge is a real pain, a real challenge in lawns, could do a persistent problem. So recommend that you do something, pick your poison. Some people don't mind getting out there and picking it on a regular basis. We never used to deal with this weed. I'd say 20 years ago when I started this, I never dealt with it. It wasn't until weather patterns started getting crazy. It's really a southern weed that's moved up in my experience. And it's by nature slipping through the cracks. So it is one of those areas with lawns that I do recommend using chemicals. I would manually remove what you can if you have the time and the patience. And then I would get a bottle of the sprays or try the granulars and zap it back quick, because if it gets into flower beds, I've had it get into a flower bed, and once it gets woven into your perennials, there's no getting rid of it because it's just always mixed with the roots. And I have clients that have it taking over huge patches. I have a strip on my walkway that I had to rip out all my perennials for 2 seasons while I tried to eradicate it before they really started coming out with some of the treatments for it. So one of the areas you may want to consider hitting aggressively while we have moisture in the ground, and hopefully you can just eradicate it and then get off chemicals again. So hope that helps, and let me know what you think, and let us know any other topics you like. We'll make videos on them. Thank you. Take care.